Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Poe, and today I'm doing week 33 of my 2023 reads. This week I read some fun books, and I also realized that I have some DNFs to wrap up. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I finished 10 Planets by Yuri Herrera, translated from Spanish by Lisa Dillman. This is a collection of literary SFF short stories that I buddy read with Angela at Literature Science Alliance and Kristen at Kristinelle SFF Reader. I was really interested in picking up this collection because I had absolutely loved reading Yuri Herrera's previous novel, Science Preceding the End of the World. It's an excellent book. I have an entire discussion video that I did with my friend Cynthia at Book Whimsy, so I will link that below. And both of us had really loved it. So when I heard that Yuri Herrera was coming out with this new short story collection, I heard about it from Becca at ReadBecca, who I will link below, when she was talking about the shortlist for the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize. And this was just such an interesting collection. So the short stories in this are kind of on the flash fiction side. Most of them I would say are around 5 pages long, and some of them are only a page long. It really is literary sci-fi and speculative fiction. It really leans into that kind of thematic approach to telling stories. Many of these are just these bite-sized exploration of ideas. A lot of it is very beautifully written and atmospheric and has some interesting ideas in it, some very interesting world building as well. I think Yuri Herrera is a little bit surreal in the way that he does his world building, so I quite liked that. And it was excellent buddy reading this with Angela and Kristen because we got to discuss a lot of what was going on and try to understand the stories. And as we went through the collection, just sort of understanding some of the themes that Herrera likes to come back to. I think that the first half of the collection was stronger than the second half. So I really loved some of the stories in the first half. In the second half, it was more just okay for me. But even so, I think that in terms of flash fiction, this is such a strong collection. I think there's very few authors who are able to pull off such complete thoughts in such a short period of space. And so, especially if you're looking for something where you could just spend a few minutes a day reading a story, I think this is really cool to pick up. I thought it was very, very interesting, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. My husband Sush and I read this out loud to each other, and we had such a fun time with this. So the premise of this book is that Scalzi wrote this kind of right after the onset of the pandemic, and we follow a character who at the very onset of the pandemic loses their job and ends up being a food delivery person. And they are struggling to get by, everything's really difficult, but they run into somebody, they're delivering food to them, who they knew when they were in college. And that person invites them to come work for their company, which they say is kind of in the large wildlife preservation line. And the main character says, okay, I guess I can give this a shot. Seems like the benefits are great, and that would be so much better than this food delivery. And it turns out that the large animals that they are preserving are kaiju, so kind of think like Godzilla-like creatures. And it's actually taking place in sort of an alternate universe that they have access to, where they go to this kaiju Earth, and there's tons of scientists and people studying the kaiju. So this book is filled with just ridiculousness, with kind of love of science fiction and this world building that just explores what kaiju would be like, and all of these scientists trying to study it and what it would be like if we had access to this other world and how the secrets would work. The story has a lot of humor, especially I think the first half of it has really funny banter between the characters. We definitely laughed a ton at a lot of the character interactions, and it has a lot of action as well, just as the characters interact with kaiju. I mean, it's a dangerous world, and so there's a ton of action. So I think that this book is just one of those fun reads where you laugh a lot and there's some fun characters, there's really cool sci-fi world building, and just lots of action. Now, I think that the second half for me wasn't as strong as the first half, partly because the info dumping is pretty heavy in this book, and the further along we went, I was just a little frustrated that we kept getting info dumping. I mean, it's cool world building, but I just would like it integrated more into the story. I also think that some of the humor kind of trailed off as we got further in the book, and there was just more action, and I'm more into the humor than I am into the action. Plus, I think that the characters, while really funny, sort of blended together in my head, and it was a little hard to kind of feel that they were all fully distinct, if that made sense. They were all just kind of in John Scalzi's funny voice. So I thought that this was definitely a fun book, maybe not like perfect by any means, but if you want something that's just like a cool escapist read, I think this is for sure worth picking up, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Another very fun book that I picked up was Cotillion by Georgette Heyer. So this is a reread for me. I love Georgette Heyer's works. She was writing in like the 1920s through 1970s and wrote a bunch of historical romances that are very fun romps, just a lot of humor in them. And this is one that I haven't reread for quite a while, and it was just so fun diving back into this story. So in this story, we follow Kit, who is somebody who's basically an orphan, but she has been taken in and it has a guardian who's this older man that's very rich but also very miserly, doesn't want to spend any money. And he decides that, you know, he's not feeling so great. He thinks he's probably going to pass away soon, and that he will leave his fortune to Kit as long as she marries one of his nephews. And so he calls all of his nephews to come to his house to kind of propose to her, and it's a little bit awkward, and the nephew that she kind of has a crush on doesn't come because he's a little bit offended, and out of a little bit of frustration, she decides to not accept, but propose instead to one of the other nephews to do a fake engagement so that she can at least have a season in London and get to live up some life and maybe make that other nephew a little bit jealous. And from there, we just get tons of ridiculousness, all kinds of scrapes that she gets into, being very unfamiliar with society in London and a very friendly person. And her kind of fake fiance is constantly trying to like get her out of fixes. And it's just like really sweet and really fun, and it makes me laugh a ton. I think that there are definitely some outdated parts in the writing. I think when you read older authors, sometimes it's a little frustrating the way that, you know, certain societal beliefs like xenophobia and ableism come up. But other than that, I just thought this was really silly and really fun, and I love the main characters. So I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And then lastly, I do have a couple of DNFs to wrap up, although these are ones that happened a couple of months ago. I just totally forgot to wrap up some of my DNFs over the summer when I was on vacation. So I wanted to go ahead and do that now. The first is Bitter Medicine by Tsai. This is a kind of urban fantasy romance that I'd heard about from Kazen at Always Doing, who I will link below. She has a great review for this, so if you're interested in checking it out, you want to know more about it, definitely check out her review. I was really intrigued because of her review and decided to give this a try, even though urban fantasy doesn't always work for me. Sometimes it's just a little heavy on action and plot and things like that, and that was definitely the feel that I was getting from this one. So I got about 11% in before I realized that this just wasn't my kind of book. There was definitely witty banter in this, but the humor style wasn't landing for me. There was also like just a ton of world building, but it kind of felt like kitchen sink world building to me, where there's just like so many things, and it's all kind of thrown at you at once. I really like to be immersed in a story and the world, not just have like lists of things thrown at me. So that just felt a little bit overwhelming for me, if that makes sense. Plus, I could just tell this is going to be really plotty and action heavy, which isn't my style so much. So totally, I think that there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in this, a lot of really cool world building, and the characters are interesting, but it just wasn't quite jiving for me. And then the other book that I DNF'd over the summer was Pearls Awaits the Tide by Stephan Pastis, which is a collection of a bunch of comic strips from Pearls Before Swine. I think that's the name of the comic strip. This is a comic strip that I kind of liked when, like, decades ago, when I was still getting newspapers and like looking at the comic strips in there. And there were a couple of those that I have saved because they really amuse me and like have on our fridge. And Sush got me this book because it's always, he thinks that those are very funny comic strips as well that I have saved. Yeah, not so much. I picked up this book and I started looking through it and I was like, oh yeah, this is not my humor style at all. Even though there are certain aspects of that comic strip when done exactly kind of in line with my taste that are quite funny, a lot of it just really isn't. It's kind of, you know, middle-aged white guy ranting about stuff type of a feel. And so it was just not jiving with me. So after about 6%, I gave up on this collection and I realized that I'm very happy with those comic strips that I have on the fridge, but I'm probably not gonna seek out more of those comic strips by this author, just not quite my style. Okay, so that is everything that I read this week, plus a couple of old DNFs. If you guys have read any of these, if you're interested in them, if you want to chat about them, if you want to tell me what you've been reading this week, I would love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.